Aloha and welcome to Where Do We Go, a podcast where we, as high schoolers, sit down with female professionals in different fields to simply talk story and share with us their experiences, advice, and overall helping us foster female leaders for the future. I'm your host, Kylee Hamamoto, and I'm so glad that you decided to join us today. To learn more about our podcast and previous episodes and speakers, visit our website at www.wegohawaii.org/listen. Our podcast is brought to you by WeGo, a nonprofit organization founded by Kylee Hamamoto with the mission to foster strong and independent female leaders. To learn more about WeGo and ways to support, visit www.wegohawaii.org for more details. Mahalo and enjoy today's episode. Hi everybody and welcome to the fourth episode of our second season of Where Do We Go? I'm Kylee Hamamoto, the founder of WeGo and the host of today's episode. Today I'm joined by Miss Erin Lau, a filmmaker who has directed and produced her own films, one of her most significant being The Moon and the Night, which we will talk about later today, but as well as producing and directing videos for the Jubilee YouTube Channel. So now I will let her introduce herself now and a little bit more about what she does. So take it
All
away.
right. Aloha everyone, and thank you, Kylee, for having me. I'm very excited to be here. One of the things that gives me the most joy is being able to help encourage and more filmmakers to come out of Hawaii, especially young women, because we need more people from our community telling our stories and getting it out to the world. And as you touched upon, I make films, and that's crazy. I tend to call myself a little bit of like a storyteller just because I am involved in a handful of mediums. I mostly work as a filmmaker in that I produce, direct, and write films for a range of mediums. So I have done digital, documentary, short film, but I also write short stories for audio. I've directed nonfiction series for apps and only recently started to consult on the writing for a video game. And so the breadth of things that I've gotten to be a part of has been really vast, but I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had. And I encourage everyone, the options of if you really enjoy telling stories, there's so many opportunities out there to build towards.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we actually have a question that we always ask on here, and so that is, who are some of the women in your life that you admire?
This is probably a very common answer you guys get, but it is true. My mom is the biggest influence for me, especially for female role models, because she's just very powerful. She can pretty much build, create, fix anything you can name from she's doing construction at our house constantly, but she also is an amazing seamstress. She made a lot of my costumes growing up. She used to be my production designer in a lot of my films because anything you said, she would build, sew, create. And she's just incredibly selfless. I don't think I know a more patient person in the world than her. And if I as I get older, if I am able to be half the woman she is, half the mother she is, I will be like, I'll just be incredibly grateful to be able to even come close to being the person she is. So she is a huge influence on me. And as far as filmmaking goes, I have been very fortunate to have a lot of amazing female filmmaking mentors and colleagues from Lizette Flannery and Misawa, Kiara Lacey. Just being in this industry can be very challenging, especially if you're a woman. And I think those mentors, friends, colleagues in particular, they've created amazing work despite it. And they handle themselves with so much grace and humor and power. And I've been very fortunate to have them as an influence, and I look up to them uh, in everything I do.
Okay, great. Actually, just following up on that is just sort of if there's a specific person or if there's a specific experience that sort of inspired you to get into film, or if you can recall like a specific moment in which you kind of knew film was something you wanted to do.
Yeah, there was a few different things that led to me being on this journey. And one of the first was I've always been around the arts, but when I was growing up, my family is actually in the music industry. My dad runs a music nonprofit called the Kiwa'alu Foundation. And so they would put on concerts and festivals, and as his kid, I would work those festivals, and starting from the 4th grade on, I was helping to film the concerts. A little bit because I couldn't play an instrument to save my life, so I would record the concerts, I help edit these pretty okay commercial things we would put on, public access TV sort of outlets. And what I found when I was introduced to that form and I started sort of making these little music videos and cutting my own stuff was that film allowed me to process and sort of explore experiences, feelings, things I just didn't know how to put in words. And it kind of gave me an outlet and a way to step out of myself and to analyze those things and just like feel like I could express them in some kind of some way. And what ended up happening is when I started screening those films, I started to see that there were a lot of people in our community that could empathize and relate to what I was sort of processing and realizing that I wasn't alone in this experience or this feeling. And so that sort of kind of captivated me. But what led me to consider this as a career was actually when I was 16 in my high school auditorium, they had screened a film called Stones by Tai Sanga, which was the first native Hawaiian language film to play Sundance. And I was just so blown away by it. It was beautiful and cinematic, and it was about us and made by someone who looked like me, who was also from a town like mine, and also a native Hawaiian. And I just didn't know we could do that and actually make a life in that work. And from that moment on, I just made that my whole life purpose is I'm gonna tell our stories on this canvas. And I've been fortunate enough that even though it's been over a decade, the journey has been fruitful and I'm getting to do that.
Well, great. And so you touched a little bit upon being Native Hawaiian, but I also wanted to ask, how has being Native Hawaiian and on top of that, female sort of affected your experience in the film industry and making and writing films?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it has showed up in a lot of different ways. I, in a beautiful way, I have found my community here that even though there I have a lot of colleagues who are not Native Hawaiian, I think what has been beautiful is finding across culture and across different communities of different backgrounds, finding shared not only shared struggles, but shared dreaming, shared hopes, and really starting in my adulthood seeing how important that is to come together as a community and to build toward these collective dreams and hopes for, making the world a better place. I think that's been really lovely in that I've found people I relate to and that I have been able to build a community with in this industry. But that being said, there there are challenges, especially being a woman of color in film. And there are a few of the things I've had to deal with is, men who sometimes have a problem with women in authority and positions of power. And I honestly don't always think they're aware of it, why they seem to challenge or feel uncomfortable with me asking them to do something. And sometimes you're not always sure, did I say something maybe that upset them? Like maybe I made a mistake and that's what's going on. But what I've found in time is that if I know I've done my job right. And, I've walked through the steps in figuring out there wasn't a mistake made and that this isn't just a bad day because we also have to extend grace and working on film sets is hard. Not everybody's gonna have a good day on set, and that's okay. But if somebody is just disrespecting you because of who you are, especially as a when it comes to your gender identity, then that's not your problem in terms of you should not bend backwards for that individual. That is for them to work through and to overcome, but you don't owe anybody accommodations because they're uncomfortable with you in that way. And so I think for myself, I've had to just like come to a place to realize like that's not me, that's you. And making sure did I do my job well? Did I treat everybody with respect? Yes, I did. Okay. Then then this isn't my problem to deal with. And I'm gonna keep doing my job. But that is hard and it's exhausting, and I won't lie about that, but I think sort of setting boundaries of where to bend and when not to bend is important. Um, and the other thing about it too, sort of building on sort of the challenges like I have experienced as far as being a woman in this space is also learning to not compete to not fall into this idea of competing with other women. I don't know what it is about our culture or society. We get it in our heads that even if there's only one other woman in the room and like six guys, our culture seems to support this idea of the women have to be in competition with each other. Like we're not supposed to both be there. And I think that's outrageous. And the only way we're going to really see big change in this industry or in the world is us working together and bringing rising tides, not pushing each other down. That goes for women, that goes for people of color, that, for anybody. But I do think this idea for women and people of color of there's only so much room at the table is an absolute lie. And just trying to dismantle that really toxic way of thinking that we actually can work together and somebody accomplishing something great is an accomplishment for the community instead of this individual mindset. So that's like a couple of the things I found working as a woman in this industry and what I've had to kind of come into awareness of and make sure that I'm leading and navigating in a really healthy way and supportive way of my peers. I could honestly go on with a much longer list, but we don't want to make the whole episode about that.
Yeah, honestly, it's really interesting because as I've been doing these podcast episodes and interviewing people from different fields, it's really great to see that honestly they give the same advice pretty much that you just gave and you mentioned about the struggles that you faced in
Oh, I
different
believe
fields
it.
too. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's really great to see how even though you're working in different fields and working in different industries, that you're still using and applying that same sort of idea of how to overcome imposter syndrome and just learning about how we can support one another. So it's really great
Yeah.
to hear from different women from different fields, but then ultimately getting that same reoccurring advice. So that will kind of lead me into my next um, question then, since you sort of talked about where you see yourself in 10 years and what do you see for women, especially minority women in film, and sort of maybe what you would like to see, and then as well as like how we can achieve that and how we can, I know you touched a little bit upon that, but more into what you want to see in the future.
Yeah. I think so. First, I'm going to start with what do I see for women, especially minority women in film. I There are a lot of challenges for being a woman of color in this industry. And if you look at the statistics of like how many women of color or even just women have directed TV or features, it is a very small percentage on the graph. But that being said, I do think it's getting better. We have so many amazing female creators and writers on shows like Hentified, Queen Sugar, Rutherford Falls. Like those are shows by women of color who are making that are about our communities and are about families of color and that are so soulful and rich and funny and interesting and complex. And even on the side of TV directing specifically, there's Sydney Freeland or Shaz Bennett. On the feature side, you have Kelly Reichardt, Karen Kusama, So Young Kim. Like the list goes on. There's such amazing work in all mediums coming out from women and women of color. And it makes me hopeful that we'll just continue to see that expand and we'll continue to see that ceiling break because it's happening right now. And so it's just kind of, it's sort of, not sort of, it's continuing to build on that foundation and momentum and making space for everyone to come up because a lot of those women, to my knowledge, have worked together with other women have come up. I have my career because of a lot of women who supported me and mentored me and called me when a job was open or recommended me for a gig. And so I think it's just continuing to focus on that mindset of working and supporting each other and not being afraid to take up space. I think culturally, women can be told they have to be apologetic or they're not supposed to be too domineering and you don't want to take up too much space in a room because that's not, I guess, not woman, like feminine. I don't know. It's stupid. I don't know. It's crazy. But I think we're sort of pushing back on those ideas and constructs and saying like, no, I deserve to be here and I deserve to speak at the table, and so do my friends. So it's getting better. It'll continue to have its challenges, but just turn on your TV or look at the movies playing in theaters and the evidence is there. As far as my journey, it's always changing, really. I think I actually had a female mentor a few years back tell me you need to look at your journey as a river in that it's not going to be straightforward. You're probably going to sort of weave in and out with the river and be taken to places that surprise you. But to not always fight that because you might be really delighted where you end up on that journey. And that's very much how my journey has been unraveling, in that I didn't know I would work for a YouTube company. I mean, a digital media company that mostly makes YouTube videos for 3 years. It wasn't 6 months before that, I wouldn't have ever guessed that would be something I would have done. And I loved it. And it was so important to my growth. And now that I've left Jubilee Media, I never would have imagined I'd be tied to so many projects I am right now. There's two short films I'm directing, and there's a feature documentary I'm getting to co-produce, and about three projects I'm writing. And I mean, last year, none of these, well, beginning of last year, none of these existed. And so I'm constantly surprised by the things that have sort of that have sort of blossomed in my life. And so I think the biggest thing for me that I'm staying focused on is, am I making work that I feel actually contributes to the betterment of our community and world? Because if I'm not doing that, then I'm wasting my time. And that isn't to say everything got to be serious, everything's got to be super like, heavy on the activism. Even romantic comedies can contribute to the world. Like it's whether it's joy or levity or reminding people to love your family or that good can overcome evil. Like I just gotta know I'm doing stuff that's good for my family and our community. And if I can keep doing that, I think no matter how my journey takes shape, I'll be okay with. And I think that's why a little bit of how I kind of introduced myself earlier, there were so many mediums I mentioned because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to make soulful, heartfelt, empathetic work that I think contributes to the good. And however that takes shape, I'm not picky about.
Well, thank you. That was really beautiful and with like the advice from your mentors. What do you think has been your most exciting or your favorite project that you've worked on that you sort of feel proud of?
Oh man, that's so hard. I have love for all of my film children. Um, no, I mean, they've all been so special in very different ways. And so I'll probably just list off a few off the top of my head. Like Little Girl's War Cry gave me the opportunity to collaborate with like the Cook Island Maori community, and to make to talk about domestic violence and indigenous values and female empowerment. And so that one was huge for me. But along with that, day pass or empty spaces, I got to make them with some of my dearest friends at the time in school. And they played a huge part in getting me into Chapman for my master's. Um, Day pass is also I was crammed in a van because we were shooting. I was crammed in a van because we were shooting a road movie from Kona to Hilo, and it was chaos, but I had so much fun shooting a road trip movie on the Big Island, and it was written by now my life partner, and we wouldn't have found each other and collaborated if it wasn't for that film. Um, Last year I got to make a short rom-com called All I Ever Wanted, and I've never made anything comedic before. And so I got to focus on scenes that were all about friendship, but also were really funny. And the amount of fun and joy I got out of that, but I don't know, I've made so many things. It's so hard for me to even like imagine choosing one. I'll share a couple last ones. As a whole, the work I got to do at Jubilee Media as well, because my time there, I made 77 videos in 3 years, and I'd never been in a position where I got to sort of be in constant communication with millions of people, and that we had the comment section below the videos. And when I did suicide survivors, for example, a discussion with a bunch of folks for that, like in just heartbreaking and vulnerable stories that poured in. Same for men dealing with emotional struggles and women dealing with struggles. Like I got to really just touch a lot of communities and a lot of people in a way I never would have imagined, and complete strangers. And so even that, my time there gave me so much growth as a human being. And so it's a little bit of a cop out answer. I recognize that. But every single thing I have made has helped me to be the person I am for in a little bit of a different way. And that's why it's a little challenging to choose one. But it's it's been a good journey.
Well, I guess we can talk a little bit about a film that I was able to watch with, and I actually watched it with my family.
Oh my gosh, you watched it with your
Yeah.
family? That's so scary.
No, but we really liked it, and it was honestly like I was I was in tears, and that was like really good. Um, and I sent it out to all of our members our club members, and I got a lot of feedback saying that they really enjoyed it too. But I guess if you could explain a little bit about that specific film and the
Yeah.
process of, I guess, creating it, and especially like developing the main character, Mahina, and if she like maybe reflects aspects of yourself or any experiences you've ever had, sort of. just touch
Yeah.
upon that.
Yeah. So The Moon and the Night got made because when I was doing my master's at Chapman, you had to make a thesis film in your final year. And I had known my whole time at Chapman that I was going to go back to Hawaii and make something. And I got some wonderful advice from my mentor, Lizette Flannery, who was my professor at the University of Hawaii. And she said, you know, think of your thesis as if you could only make one more thing, what would you want to say? And The Moon of the Night came sort of from a few different places in me. On one level, I really wanted to make a film that pushed back on this sort of paradise narrative that tends to be sold about Hawaii. Not to say I do not love the white sandy beach rom-com or the Godzilla or the action movies that come through, like no shade whatsoever. But I do feel, at least at that time, because there's been so many wonderful independent films coming out of Hawaii now, um, there just was a need for something that felt more reflective of the gray area of Hawaii and to see us in more nuance and to understand that, yes, it's a beautiful place, but we have a lot of struggles especially if you consider sort of the socioeconomic or cultural realities in Hawaii. It is not easy for everyone. And I wanted to talk about, when you're dealing with those types of obstacles, how does it affect your family, your relationships, and even like the person you get to become? And it's not to remove people from accountability. Like, yes, the dad fought dogs. You should get in trouble for fighting dogs. But I think I just want to encourage people to ask, but how did he get there? How did we get here? And to just extend a little bit more empathy and thought into the history and the wider context that's going in our homes and what that looks like. And so on one level, I wanted to sort of explore that. On a second level, um, Mahina is very much a lot of me. Not in that I literally will write myself into this story. Anything I've written, anything I've directed even to some extent, you're gonna have a lot of yourself bleed in. And there were some relationships and experiences in my life that kind of found its way on the page. And what tend to tell a lot of students who want to be filmmakers, you don't always have to adapt. Sometimes you reinterpret or just inspired from. So no, I don't have any family that fought dogs to my knowledge, but I had a lot of feelings I was trying to understand at the time, and that found its way on the page. Um, and so there is a really personal level in that way, but there was also this sort of wanting to speak about Hawaii in a more nuanced way to the world. And that's how The Moon and the Night took shape. And it was hard. It was 10 days of shooting. And anybody who is worried about that dog fight, those two dogs were boyfriend and girlfriend. We separated them for a week. They saw each other, they were super stoked, and so they roughhoused. And so they're just playing in that shot. And we just put sound design that sounded very convincing, that made it seem like they, were fighting. And I it was probably the hardest movie I have no, it is. It is the hardest movie I've ever made to this point. But I was lucky enough that I got to make it with my best friends. And luckily it wasn't terrible when it came out. At least the people who've told me what they think.
No, yeah, we were all like, I was so curious in how the dog fight was filmed, and like, I was like worried for the dogs. I didn't know if like,
Yeah, no, they're just playing.
yeah.
It's amazing what good sound design can
No,
do.
yeah, it was really like, yeah. Um, but I guess you touched a little bit upon advice that you would want to give aspiring filmmakers, and I guess kind of want to revisit that. but specifically maybe your advice for aspiring female filmmakers, especially like ones in high school and like our demographic that are interested in going into film. If you have any advice for them, what they should, start to like sort of wean into the industry, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna put my notes in front of me because every time I answer any question sort of like this, feeling I always leave and then remember something and then I get frustrated, like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, I should have said that." So this time I put it in front of me.
No, this is exactly how I feel when I'm doing like these interviews. I'm like, oh, I should have asked that question, or
Yeah, we've all been there. It's no matter how far in my career I get, even though I work have worked in unscripted and documentaries and have done hundreds of interviews, I still make that mistake. And so here today I will try to be better. But there's a few different things and this is going to sound a bit it's not very specific to film, but I think it's important no matter what in your life you're going to do and it's to learn to love yourself because when you make films, you are going, at least I hope, are going to screen those films to the public. And that's scary. I'm still terrified of that process. I'll screen a movie and I'll get nauseous in the theater because I'm just so stressed about it. And that's natural, but you want to start to work on not basing your self-worth off, your productivity or what you make because it's not healthy. You have worth and you are worthy of love no matter what you like, no matter what movie you make. It has no difference. Um, and you will find if you don't put so much pressure on the work, no matter if you're making art or you're going to go into science or math or engineering, if you can try to separate your self-worth from your productivity or the project itself, you will have more freedom to take risks and freedom to explore and also just more energy to bounce back for the next thing. And so I think it's normal to get tied up, like, when if grades don't work out or you don't do well on a team or on a project. That's totally human. The more, though, you can kind of separate yourself from, oh, I feel worthless or I'm a failure because this didn't work out, the healthier of a career you can have and a just higher quality of life you can have. And so that's something that I think is a deeply important no matter what you do, especially in the arts where it's subjective and there is no right answer. Um, 'Cause the other thing about if you go into the arts is sometimes that the industry can be confusing and fickle because there's no straight path. So if you can find for yourself stable pillars that don't waver, some people find that in faith and family or culture. Um, Also building that as well as a part of your foundation. So learning to love yourself and also learning to have these pillars in your life also not tied to work. Um, those for me are some of the biggest things. And then speaking purely to filmmaking, it's gonna sound crazy, but like you should embrace failure. Make stuff, make so many things, and with everything, you're gonna find, oh, I didn't do this thing felt weird, or I didn't like that. And that's great because that means you're getting better and you're learning. I cannot look at a single film of mine and not feel stress or meh about something in it. Probably 50 different things. But at least I'm in a position where I can look at it and be like, okay, that I could have done much better. And that's just a part of the growth. So trying to get comfortable with everything not being perfect, and then taking as many swings at the bat as you can. Just keep making stuff. Anything in life, you have to do it again and again and again to get good at it. And so those are a few of the things that come to mind. And the last thing I'll say is a lot of people think they have to be Spielberg or Tarantino, basically household movie director folks' names. You should not try to be anyone except yourself in the film work. Steven Spielberg and Quentin Tarantino, have blossoming careers because they're being themselves and totally embracing that. You need to do the same thing. What makes you special and different and unique is that you're this kid from this town who grew up with these folks and these friends. Like, embrace those stories and those specificities and put that into the work, because nobody else can replicate that. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just learn to put yourself into the work and to be confident in who you are.
Well, I think that's a great place to sort of end off. But if there's any last words you want to share, or if you can tell us also where our listeners can find you and your work.
Yeah. One of the places you can find my work is erinlaufilms.com. I also made a lot of work for Jubilee Media, the YouTube channel, and later in the year we'll have a film coming out with the support of Netflix, Tribeca, and Gold House, to be determined where and when, but we'll be shooting that on the Big Island in a few weeks, and it's called Inheritance. So you'll probably see updates on my website and social media when that comes out. But yeah, it's the last thing I just really want to say outside. Self promotion is always weird to me. So I'm going to focus on you guys instead. But at the end of the day, I think the thing I really hope for is that I just want to see more kids out of Hawaii telling stories. Like, we need it. I There are so many stories I cannot tell that I want to champion coming out of our community, and that will only come from you guys. And so if I can help to encourage that and to support that, man, I'll feel like I did something with my life. But please don't give up. It's hard, but anything worth doing is going to be challenging, and you're going to be okay. And when it gets hard, you're going to take a walk and you're going to breathe and you're going to do some yoga and you're going to hug somebody, and then you're going to go back in and keep pushing for what you want.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for making time for me. You're always really busy, but with your new projects and stuff. But thank you so much for coming in and answering some of our questions.
No, no problem.
Mahalo for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you were able to gain valuable insight from our wonderful speaker today. We hope you have a great rest of your day and tune in next time. This is Kylie, signing off. We'll see you in the next one.